When you walk into my office, I'm already reading your body like a book before you utter a single word. Not from medical charts or lab results, but from the way you move through that doorway, the way you carry yourself, the subtle details that most people overlook completely. And here's what decades of clinical practice have taught me. The aging that truly matters, the kind that determines whether your next decade will be vibrant or declining, isn't showing up on your face. It's revealing itself in places you've never thought to look. I'm Dr. Michael Kent, and today I'm going to share something most physicians simply don't have time to discuss with their patients anymore. Your body is broadcasting 11 visible warning signals right now that expose exactly what's happening beneath your skin. I'm not talking about wrinkles or gray hair. I'm talking about biological red flags that reveal your muscle reserves, how well your metabolism is functioning, the integrity of your blood vessels, and whether your nervous system is thriving or quietly failing. These are the factors that actually decide if you'll remain independent, powerful, and fully capable, or if you'll gradually deteriorate without ever understanding why it's happening. Here's the critical truth most people miss. They don't realize their aging has shifted into high gear until their physical function has already been compromised. Weakness gets noticed only after significant muscle has vanished. Balance issues become obvious only after dangerous falls begin. Fatigue finally registers only after metabolism has fundamentally shifted. But here's the game changer. Every single one of these deteriorations actually announces itself much earlier through visible signals, if you understand what you're looking for. Once you grasp the underlying mechanism driving what you're seeing, the confusion about why your efforts aren't producing results instantly dissolves. You'll finally see precisely where to focus your energy for maximum impact. Let me start with something that's probably never crossed your mind as an aging marker: your calf muscles. I'm talking specifically about the size and contour of your lower legs. When someone enters my exam room, one of my immediate assessments is whether their lower leg maintains that full, rounded muscular appearance it should have, or if it's begun narrowing into an almost spindle-like shape just above the ankle. Why does this matter so profoundly? Your calf muscles don't just help you walk, they function as your body's secondary heart. With every single step you take, they contract powerfully, pumping blood from your leg veins back upward toward your central circulation, fighting against gravity's constant pull. When those muscles begin shrinking, this critical pumping action weakens dramatically. Blood return becomes sluggish and inefficient. Your circulation slows to a crawl. Your heart is suddenly forced to work overtime, compensating for work your calves used to handle effortlessly. But the mechanical aspect is actually just the beginning. What's unfolding metabolically is far more alarming. Calf muscle loss stands as one of our most powerful predictors of insulin resistance, physical frailty, and premature death. Not because calf muscles themselves are uniquely special, but because they're acting as an early warning system for what's happening throughout your entire body. Your calves are among the very first places where muscle disappears when you become sedentary, when your protein consumption drops, when your metabolic signaling begins malfunctioning. They're your biological canary in the coal mine. And here's what absolutely nobody is telling you. This isn't happening simply because you're getting older. It's happening because of how you're choosing to age. Muscle loss is not inevitable, despite what you've been told. It's merely common. And that distinction changes everything, because common problems have proven solutions. Now let me reveal how this connects to another visible change that's transforming your entire movement mechanics: your posture. I'm specifically talking about forward head posture combined with that increasing upper back rounding. You've witnessed this transformation in others. Perhaps you've even felt it creeping into your own body. The head gradually drifts forward, shoulders curl inward, the upper spine curves excessively. Most people assume this is simply what aging looks like. But what you're actually witnessing is structural collapse driven by progressive muscle imbalances and years upon years of accumulated mechanical stress. Here's the devastating mechanism at work. Your head weighs approximately 10 to 12 pounds. When it's positioned directly above your shoulders where it belongs, your neck muscles manage that load with remarkable efficiency. But here's the shocking part. For every single inch your head migrates forward, the effective weight your neck must support increases by another 10 pounds. So if your head has drifted forward just 3 inches, your neck is now struggling to support 40 pounds instead of 12. The deep neck flexor muscles, those small but critical stabilizers designed to hold your head in proper position, gradually weaken and fail. The larger, more superficial muscles are forced to compensate, but they were never designed for this kind of sustained loading. They fatigue rapidly. Your head drifts even further forward. Your upper back rounds more severely to compensate. You've now created a self-perpetuating downward spiral. What makes this particularly dangerous is that forward head posture doesn't merely cause neck discomfort. It actively restricts how much your rib cage can expand during breathing. It shifts your center of gravity in ways that dramatically increase your fall risk. It immediately signals to me that someone has experienced significant functional capacity loss. The reason I'm explaining this underlying mechanism in such detail is because once you truly understand what's driving this change, you'll instantly understand why generic advice like, just stand up straighter, is completely worthless. The muscles responsible for holding you upright have become weak and dysfunctional. This problem is fundamentally about strength deficiency, not lack of awareness or willpower. Now I want to show you something even more specific, something most people would never in a million years connect to their overall health status: the shape and appearance of your shoulders. When you observe someone from a side view, you should see a prominently rounded cap of muscle draped over the shoulder joint. That's your deltoid muscle. It gives your shoulder its athletic contour and structural definition. But as people age, that beautiful roundness flattens and disappears. The shoulder begins looking narrower and less substantial. The arm appears less defined and weaker. This visible change is what we call deltoid atrophy. What's truly remarkable about this particular sign is that it frequently appears well before people notice any functional weakness in their daily activities. They can still lift objects. They can still raise their arms overhead without difficulty. But underneath the surface, muscle tissue is silently vanishing. And because the deltoid is such a large, prominent, easily visible muscle, it serves as a perfect proxy indicator for what's likely happening throughout your entire body. If your shoulder is shrinking, I can tell you with near certainty that your back muscles are shrinking. Your leg muscles are shrinking. Your core muscles are shrinking. You're experiencing systemic muscle reserve loss throughout your body, and your shoulder just happens to be the most visible, early warning location. Why should this concern you deeply? Because muscle reserve is what ultimately determines your body's resilience and recovery capacity. It's what enables you to bounce back from illness, from surgical procedures, from unavoidable periods of physical inactivity. When you lack adequate reserve, minor setbacks rapidly become major health crises. And here's the confusing, frustrating part that catches people completely off guard. You can feel absolutely fine right up until the moment you suddenly don't. The muscle loss progresses silently in the background until it's not silent anymore. This is precisely why understanding these visible signs matters so profoundly. They provide you with precious lead time to intervene before crisis hits. Let me shift your attention to something you've probably noticed but completely dismissed as merely cosmetic: the veins on the backs of your hands and forearms becoming increasingly prominent and visible. Now, this isn't the same vascular visibility you see in elite athletes or bodybuilders with extremely low body fat percentages. This is something fundamentally different. This is the direct result of progressive skin thinning combined with the loss of subcutaneous fat, that protective cushioning layer that normally sits between your skin and the underlying vascular structures. What's occurring beneath your skin's surface is active collagen degradation. As you age, your skin's entire structural framework progressively weakens and deteriorates. The dermis, that crucial middle layer where all your collagen and elastin proteins live, becomes increasingly thin and fragile. The fat layer that once provided padding between your skin and veins gradually disappears. The result is that veins that were always present in your hands simply become far more visible to the naked eye. But this isn't merely a cosmetic surface-level shift. It's actually part of a much broader, more concerning pattern of vascular aging happening throughout your body. Your blood vessel walls are becoming progressively stiffer, less elastic, increasingly prone to damage and dysfunction. So when I examine a patient's hands and see those prominently visible veins, I'm not simply observing a surface change. I'm seeing a clear marker of biological age that runs far deeper than whatever their birth certificate says. And here's where the confusion intensifies for most people. Two individuals who are both exactly 70 years old can display wildly different skin quality depending on their lifetime sun exposure, smoking history, nutritional habits, and genetic factors, which means this visible sign isn't actually telling you how many years you've been alive. It's telling you how well or poorly you've been aging. And that distinction is absolutely critical because it reveals that much of this deterioration, up to a certain point, has actually been within your control all along. This connects directly to the next warning sign, which builds on this exact same theme. The skin on your hands and forearms taking on a translucent, almost paper-thin quality. If you've ever examined the back of an elderly relative's hand and noticed their skin appears nearly see-through, you're witnessing dermal thinning happening in real time. The skin is literally becoming thinner at a structural level because fibroblast activity, those specialized cells responsible for producing fresh collagen, dramatically slows with age. New collagen production plummets. The structural proteins that previously kept your skin thick and resilient are now degrading faster than they can possibly be replaced. And once again, this transformation is powerfully linked to biological age rather than chronological age. How you've lived your life, what environmental exposures you've endured, what nutritional support you've consistently provided your body, all of these factors profoundly influence how your skin ages, which means when someone confidently tells you that aging skin is completely inevitable and unstoppable, they're only partially correct. Yes, some degree of thinning happens to absolutely everyone, but the degree of that thinning, the rate at which it progresses, the severity it ultimately reaches, those factors are highly variable, and variability always means opportunity for intervention. Now I want to discuss something that carries absolutely massive metabolic significance, something that flies completely under the radar because it doesn't initially look problematic to the untrained eye. A progressively widening waist combined with relatively thin, underdeveloped arms and legs. This is what medical professionals sometimes call the skinny fat phenotype, and it's a hallmark warning sign of insulin resistance. Here's the mechanism unfolding in your body. As people age, particularly if they maintain a sedentary lifestyle, muscle tissue is systematically lost from the arms and legs. We call this peripheral muscle wasting. But simultaneously, fat begins accumulating around the abdomen at an alarming rate, particularly visceral fat, the especially dangerous type that wraps itself around your internal organs. So you end up with someone who might show a completely normal BMI reading on their health assessment, whose body weight hasn't changed significantly in years, but whose underlying body composition has shifted dramatically and dangerously. They appear slim and healthy to the casual observer, but metabolically they're heading toward disaster. This specific pattern shows extremely strong associations with type 2 diabetes development, cardiovascular disease, and significantly increased early mortality risk. And what makes this pattern so insidious and dangerous is that it doesn't trigger any alarm bells. People don't think they're overweight because by traditional measurement standards, they're genuinely not. But fat distribution location matters just as much as, if not more than, total fat mass. And central abdominal fat, especially visceral fat, represents the most metabolically dangerous fat type your body can carry. It's hormonally active and disruptive. It drives chronic inflammation throughout your system. It severely disrupts normal insulin signaling pathways. And here's where the confusion becomes overwhelming for most people. Their weight on the scale stays stable. Their doctor reviews their BMI and says everything looks fine, but they feel progressively worse as time passes. They're experiencing more persistent fatigue. Their blood sugar readings slowly creep upward. Their waist circumference increases even though the scale isn't moving at all. What you're witnessing when you see this pattern isn't just weight redistribution. It's metabolic aging actively unfolding. And the reason I'm walking you through this mechanism in such detail is because once you truly understand what's driving this change, you'll immediately understand why generic weight loss advice completely fails to address it. The fundamental problem isn't your total body weight. The problem is muscle loss happening simultaneously with visceral fat accumulation. You need to actively rebuild muscle tissue while improving insulin sensitivity at the same time. That's where your true leverage point exists. Let me reveal another sign now, one that's incredibly subtle yet extraordinarily predictive of health outcomes: your natural walking speed. Specifically, how quickly you move when you're not consciously thinking about it, when you're simply moving naturally from one location to another. This is sometimes called the sixth vital sign in medicine because it simultaneously reflects so many different body systems: your cardiovascular reserve capacity, your muscle strength, your joint integrity, your nervous system coordination, even your cognitive processing function. What unfolds over time is that walking speed tends to progressively slow, not dramatically overnight, not in sudden drops, but steadily across years and decades. Your natural pace decreases, your stride length shortens, your body moves with noticeably less confidence and fluidity, and experienced physicians can detect this within mere seconds of observation. We don't need sophisticated treadmill testing equipment. We simply watch someone walk down the hallway, and we can make remarkably accurate predictions about their overall health status and functional reserve capacity. But here's the part that matters most profoundly. Walking speed isn't merely a consequence or symptom of aging. It actually functions as an active driver of further aging. When you walk more slowly, you place significantly less cardiovascular demand on your system. You engage substantially less muscle tissue. You stimulate your nervous system with far less intensity. And this creates a vicious, self-reinforcing downward cycle. The slower you walk, the progressively weaker you become. The weaker you become, the slower you inevitably walk. Your physical function declines not because time is simply passing, but because the demand you're placing on your body is steadily decreasing. And this is precisely where people become trapped in a devastating pattern. They consciously slow down because they believe they should conserve precious energy, protect vulnerable joints, avoid physical strain and discomfort. But your body doesn't interpret this reduced demand as protective care. It interprets it as a clear biological signal that full capacity is no longer needed or required. And your body adapts accordingly by systematically reducing that capacity even further. The solution isn't to walk more cautiously or carefully. The solution is to walk with greater intensity, more frequently, in ways that genuinely challenge your system enough to maintain and preserve it. Now let me connect this principle to something that seems completely unrelated on the surface, but follows the exact same biological mechanism: facial muscle tone. I'm not talking about wrinkles or fine lines here. I'm talking about the progressive loss of definition in your cheeks, the flattening of your jawline, the general sagging that occurs not because your skin has stretched, but because the muscle tissue beneath it has weakened and atrophied. Your face contains dozens of small, intricate muscles that provide it with shape, structure, and expressive capability. As those muscles progressively atrophy and weaken, the skin draped over them loses its underlying support structure. Your face becomes less structured, less defined, less youthful in appearance. And what most people completely fail to realize is that visible facial aging is driven primarily by muscle loss first, with skin changes following as a secondary consequence. The vast majority of what we perceive as facial aging is being driven by what's deteriorating underneath the surface, not what's happening on top. This is precisely why cosmetic interventions and procedures only achieve limited results. If the underlying structural foundation is actively collapsing, no amount of surface treatment can restore the original contour and definition. You can temporarily fill empty spaces, you can mechanically tighten loose skin, but you absolutely cannot replace lost muscle tissue with injections or surgical procedures. And the mechanism here follows the same pattern as everywhere else throughout your body. Muscle that isn't regularly used undergoes atrophy. Muscle that isn't consistently stimulated progressively weakens. Your facial muscles operate under these exact same rules, with no exceptions. Let me show you one final visible sign that carries enormous predictive power for your health outcomes: the overall appearance of your hands, specifically the loss of natural plumpness and fullness, the increasing prominence of tendons visible on the back of your hand, the general thinning of soft tissue. If you directly compare a young person's hand to an elderly person's hand, the difference isn't merely skin deep, it's a dramatic volume difference. Young, healthy hands possess a natural fullness that comes from robust muscle tissue, adequate fat padding, and healthy connective tissue. As we age, that protective padding systematically disappears. Tendons become starkly visible through the skin. Bones clearly show through, and functionally, grip strength declines significantly. Grip strength might sound trivial or unimportant, but it actually stands as one of the single most powerful longevity markers medical science has ever identified. It correlates strongly with total body muscle mass, cardiovascular health status, cognitive function, and overall mortality risk. A weak, feeble handshake isn't merely a minor social awkwardness. It's a profound biological signal broadcasting vital information. And when I formally test grip strength during office examinations, I'm not simply measuring hand muscle capability. I'm assessing your entire body's systemic strength reserve capacity. Now I want to shift to something internal that manifests as an external symptom, something the vast majority of people dismiss as completely normal and expected: feeling intensely, overwhelmingly sleepy immediately after eating meals. You eat a typical lunch, and within 30 minutes you're desperately struggling to keep your eyes open. Most people automatically assume this is simply what naturally happens after eating, that it's a normal biological response, that absolutely everyone experiences it to some degree. But in reality, this post-meal fatigue is very frequently an early warning sign of developing insulin resistance. Here's what should happen. When you eat, your blood sugar naturally rises. In a properly functioning, healthy metabolism, insulin is promptly released, glucose gets efficiently taken up into your cells for energy, and your energy levels remain stable and consistent. But when you've become insulin resistant, glucose spikes far higher than it should. Your pancreas is forced to release substantially more insulin to bring those elevated levels back down. That excessive reactive insulin surge can then cause blood sugar to drop too rapidly, resulting in severe fatigue, mental brain fog, and an overwhelming, irresistible need to nap. This is metabolic aging actively unfolding in real time. It's not simply about feeling tired after lunch. It's fundamentally about how efficiently your body is processing and handling fuel. And if this pattern is occurring after every single meal you consume, it deserves serious attention, because it's clearly signaling that your glucose regulation system has become impaired and dysfunctional. The confusion that traps most people is that their fasting blood sugar measurements might still appear completely normal on testing. Their hemoglobin A1C might still fall within the standard reference range. So their doctor confidently tells them everything is fine and there's nothing to worry about. But postprandial glucose response, your blood sugar behavior after eating, frequently becomes dysfunctional years, sometimes even decades, before fasting glucose measurements start rising. You're receiving a critical early warning signal that standard conventional testing completely fails to capture. Finally, let me reveal the last sign, one that appears minor and insignificant but actually predicts major health outcomes: losing your balance when attempting to stand still. You're standing in line somewhere, waiting patiently, and you suddenly realize you cannot stand balanced on one leg for more than a few fleeting seconds without wobbling uncontrollably. This reflects two critical systems declining simultaneously: deteriorating proprioception, which is your body's sophisticated sense of where it exists in physical space, and vestibular system aging, which involves your inner ear structures and overall balance mechanisms. What makes this sign particularly medically significant is that the inability to balance on a single leg for at least 10 consecutive seconds is strongly associated with a significantly elevated risk of death within the next decade. Not because balance ability itself is directly fatal, but because it serves as a powerful reflection of overall nervous system integrity and function. What's actively happening inside your body is that the sophisticated feedback loop connecting your muscles, your joints, and your brain is becoming progressively less precise and responsive. Neural signals are slower and weaker. Corrective responses are increasingly delayed. And as that critical feedback mechanism continues weakening, your physical stability declines accordingly. This represents nervous system aging in action, and here's the empowering truth. It's highly modifiable and reversible. Balance capacity actively improves with regular practice, with appropriate challenge, with consistent stimulation. But most people actively avoid balance training work because it feels uncomfortable and awkward, because it forces them to confront how much functional capacity they've already lost. And so their decline continues progressing, completely unchallenged and unaddressed. Now, if you step back and examine all 11 of these visible warning signs together as a comprehensive picture, they clearly point to 3 core biological processes actively driving aging: progressive muscle loss, metabolic dysfunction, and nervous system decline. Real aging isn't cosmetic or superficial. The wrinkles, the gray hair, those are merely surface-level changes. The real aging, the kind that determines your quality of life, is unfolding in your muscles, in your metabolism, in your brain and nervous system. And here's what matters most, what you absolutely must understand. Every single one of these signs is modifiable and reversible to varying degrees. Muscle loss can be reversed and rebuilt through proper resistance training. Metabolic dysfunction can be dramatically improved through better nutritional choices and targeted movement. Nervous system decline can be significantly slowed through dedicated balance work, improved sleep quality, and consistent cognitive engagement. None of this deterioration is permanently set in stone or irreversible. The reason most people feel like their efforts aren't producing results is devastatingly simple. They're addressing completely wrong variables. They're obsessively focused on total body weight when the real problem is muscle tissue loss. They're focused on endless cardio when the actual problem is insufficient strength. They're focused on avoiding all physical strain when the true problem is inadequate challenge to their systems. The earlier you recognize and respond to these warning signs, the more precious intervention time you possess. You don't need to wait passively until function is already lost. You don't need to wait for an official medical diagnosis. You can take action right now, today, this very moment, based on what your body is already clearly showing you. Aging doesn't suddenly switch on like a light later in life. It creeps in slowly, steadily, across decades of accumulated choices. And the exact same principle applies to slowing it down and reversing it. The earlier you begin taking action, the more powerful and dramatic the effect becomes. But even if you're clearly seeing multiple signs right now, even if some have been present for years, you still possess significant leverage and capacity. You just need to understand precisely where to apply your effort and exactly why those interventions work at a biological level. That's what I wanted you to truly understand today. Not just what actions to take, but why they matter profoundly and how everything connects mechanistically. Because once you clearly see and understand the underlying mechanism, the path forward becomes crystal clear and obvious.